those who have attended before, welcome back. For anyone new joining today's show and tell, we wanted to do a quick recap of the projects and the story so far to set the scene before we dive into the updates. So what are Ripper and Bobs? So Ripper is looking to develop new digital services for submitting planning applications to reduce the reasons for incorrect or invalid applications and improve the process for applicants. Bobs is looking to develop a new digital system for processing planning applications. This system is designed by officers for officers to enable applications to be processed more efficiently and making better use of data and technology. As always, more information on the Ripper and Bobs projects can be found on the project websites listed on this slide. Next slide, please. So the Ripper and Bobs projects have been going since around 2018-2019 and were worked on and developed through numerous phases separately. In 2020, we recognised the need for closer alignment of both projects due to the link between public-facing application side and the back-end officer assessment process. Over 2021, we moved from 2 projects, 2 teams to 1 team, 2 products, which is one of the reasons why we've recently moved from separate show and tells to this combined session. Next slide, please. So here is the agenda for today's presentation. We'll be hearing from various members of the project team to share what we've been working on in the last few weeks. We'll be holding a Q&A at the end of the show and tell, so if you have any questions about the project or any of the updates, please do post them in the chat and we'll cover these at the end. Kicking us off with today's updates, I'll now pass to Alistair from Open Systems Lab to talk a bit about the work going on with Ripper.
Cool, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, we're going to start off talking about the Ripper side of things. I always think this is it's in a way this is a kind of name that hasn't really aged very well because of course it's doing much more than that. In simple terms, what we're working on are we're working on the public-facing digital planning services, and particularly at the moment we're working on the first 2 services, which are a service called Find Out If You Need Planning Permission, and another service called Apply for a Lawful Development Certificate, both of which do what they say on the tin, basically. First, we're going to kind of give a quick run through of some of the stuff that's sort of work in progress, some of the stuff that we're working on over the last month. One thing that's happened over the last month, which is just quite a nice moment to mark, is that in March, we got to report back from the team at Digital Accessibility Centre, DAC, very nice bunch, who had kind of been sweating through and working with us to get the services to a point of where they met the accessibility standard WCAG 2.1 AA level, which basically means that all the services built using these kind of components should be just basically accessible for a very wide range of users, including users using screen readers and other kinds of assistive technology, provided that the content in those services is written according to the design sort of principles that we've documented and set out for doing so. So that's really cool. And as I say, it's not just a kind of a one moment in time. First, because in theory it should mean that any service that we build with these components should have the same kind of accessibility in there anyway, and also the dev team have built in a whole load of tests and stuff to try and make sure, as we continue to develop the software as well, that we remain accessible. But we will in future have further opportunities to check and audit that as well. But it's a good moment to reach, and thanks to the team at DAC for their work on that. For next, I'm going to hand over to Daph to talk about the work we're doing on save and return.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Alistair, and good morning, everyone. As Alistair said there, one of the kind of core bits of work we've been looking at recently is adding the ability to save and return for kind of complex applications. For example, it may be the case that you need to go and get some documents, or you need to consult a third party before you continue through the flow. So this will allow users to have this ability. They'll be able to start an application, save it, return to it at a later date when they have the full information. Now, this also has the kind of added benefit that it can allow you to control multiple applications at any one time. So for one user could have multiple applications for a single service. They could also have multiple applications for multiple services. through this method rather than just a single one ongoing in a kind of synchronous fashion. And it's important to say as well that this save and return ability will only apply to certain flows and not all flows. So for simpler flows, this is not something that'll be required, but for a more complex flow or application, we will be able to turn this facility on. So what I'm going to do is give you a very kind of brief demo of this, show how that would work for an end user. Following on from that, then we'll look at the next steps and kind of the remaining work we've got on this. So if you allow me a second, I shall share my screen. Are you able to see that?
Can you currently see your foresty background?
Yeah, I'm being prompted for user permissions here, so you'll have to bear with me. Apologies for this. So that should be granted now. Let me just try that again. One moment, please.
Oh, yeah, that's working. That's working.
Are you able to see a few kind of text boxes?
Yep.
Perfect. Perfect. Sorry, I can't see what you're seeing, but I'll go for it. So what I have here, which you should be able to see, and please tell me if you can see this, is a very simple flow, which we're going to look at today. Can you see that?
Yep.
Perfect. So as I said, it doesn't apply, this facility doesn't apply to all applications, only ones with this kind of send component here, which we're going to use as a kind of a proxy for a kind of a complex flow. So if we have a send component in our flow, what the applicant will see when they first go to the kind of standard address of the service will be a prompt for an email address. Once they enter this, they would go through kind of the application process as normal, answering questions. And this option will always be there at the bottom of the screen, the option to save and return to this application later. Once they do that, we use the GovUK Notify service to send them an email, which will contain a magic link. So what this means, as you hopefully just saw pop up there, is an email being sent. Obviously, this kind of dummy data at the moment, but it will give some basic information, including expiry date, information about the application, and some other information about kind of how to access help. So this magic link then will allow them to pick up the application from where they were. Once they confirm their email address, they can then jump back in and carry on with that. So what that would mean, as I said, is I could go back into my inbox, find this email at a later date, and pick things up. Now, there is another route through in case someone has maybe lost the email or is not sure what they have. Maybe they've got multiple applications, as we said at the start there. They can jump straight back into this resume option. Sorry, I'll highlight that again. So they can resume their application by entering an email. And what should happen there? Sorry, I think I was on the incorrect link there. 1 second, sorry. There we go. So this is the option showing here. So when they land on the flow, they can choose to resume. They enter their email address, and we have a kind of a generic message saying that if we do hold any information, we'll contact them and send them a message. And what this does is then sends them a list of all applications which they may be currently working on. So again, dummy data here, but hopefully you get the idea that we can now jump back into a previous one. Once we confirm the email address, just as an additional kind of step of security there, we can then carry on working from where we are on this previous session. So that's a brief demo there for you. What I'll do now is I'll just stop sharing my screen and jump back to talk to you about some of the kind of the next steps we're going to be taking to get this into the hands of users. So we need to complete some of the work on handling kind of session data and just kind of wiring all that up essentially. We still have a bit of work to do on kind of what we're calling reconciliation. Essentially, as the flows, the kind of the logic of the questions is dynamic and can change frequently. We need to kind of reconciliation step. So what happens if the questions changed in between you answering them the first time around and you're returning on your second or third or fourth session. We're also going to add an additional step, which is kind of notifying users in advance of application expiry, for example, 7 days before, just to give them that little nudge to get back and complete the process, complete the service. And of course, there's going to be ongoing testing on all of this. So that's everything for now. There will be a Q&A at the end. If anyone has any questions, we'll maybe come back to that. But I'll hand over to Jess now, who's going to talk about something else we're working on.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Jess, also a developer with Open Systems Lab, building RIPA. One of the other pieces that we are working on ahead of the public beta launch is data integrations with various systems. So the one that you commonly hear about on this show and tell is BOPS, the back office planning system. But we are also working on integrating with Uniform, which comes from the company iDocs and is an internal case management software currently used by many of our initial council partners to manage planning data. While in a lot of ways, I think we've been like sort of optimizing for BOPS so far, we still know that there are like legacy softwares in place that councils are using, and it's important to be able to establish connections with those as well. So Uniform is sort of our first go at this. And when we're able to create applications from RIPA data in Uniform, that'll sort of like have this unique benefit for officers of being able to pull up all of the historical records that Uniform also has and be able to compare things side by side. Great. The pieces of this that we're building, the ability for our content editors to specify and control if a service should submit application data to BOPS or Uniform, but also recognizing that there are going to be many cases where we may actually want to be submitting application data to multiple systems. We are not trying to make this like an either or, but rather a really flexible both and situation. But all while recognizing that our public applicants should still be able to sort of see a unified success message and just understand that their application data was submitted successfully, independent of where that goes. So to do this, we need to format a packet of application data that is compatible with the Uniform system, and then be able to send it to councils to automatically create new Uniform cases. And I can take over screen sharing now to show you our first little proof of concept here. We're still working with the folks at iDocs and Uniform to sort of make this tech work fully end to end. But what I can show you on our side are a few of like the big key stepping stones here. So this is the editor view that our content editors are used to working in. This is where they design services. In a very small test flow like this, it's very common that there's a single send component and then you have a confirmation page after it. But what we are now working on is, when you add a send component, how do you actually like, you can specify a destination, so choose where that should go. And as part of sort of flexible service design, how can we also make this something that could perhaps be conditional? So for example, maybe I want to send all of the proposed work cases over to BOPS. And I want any cases coming in for existing work to go to Uniform. This is absolutely just an example I'm sort of making up on the fly here, but you can see that I have some flexibility in structuring my graph, and I can support multiple send components. And if I wanted one of these to go to both, I could sort of again continue just sort of adding them like this, and everything will still hopefully funnel down into a really nice singular confirmation page. And to show you a bit of this in action, so this is a sample, the apply for a lawful development certificate flow in Buckinghamshire. I have sort of, for the sake of this presentation, queued up a bunch of answers and sort of gone through the steps. I'm at the review page of my application. So I have an address. Instead of drawing my site boundary, I uploaded a location plan. I answered all of these questions about replacing a window. I uploaded some files, which are just example screenshots for here. Now I will continue on. I don't have any declarations. I confirm my application is accurate. This is a test, so I don't have a fee. I'm ready to submit. This is sort of the proof of concept piece. Here we are sort of creating our packet of application data for Uniform. You can see that the address I was in the Wickham part of Buckinghamshire. Uniform is a legacy software and it will look a little different for every council. So these are sort of important pieces of data we need to know. And right now, proof of concept style, before I can sort of send this end to end, I can sort of download it for inspection. And the key pieces of data that I have in here. So I have a unique copy of every file that I uploaded. If I uploaded the same file for multiple questions, which we know happens for certain people, maybe your location plan is the same as your elevation plan or something like this. I just pulled down like a single copy of that. I have a CSV in here. This is the same CSV that the applicant will see on their confirmation page of all of their application data. And then I have an XML file, which is sort of the special Uniform specific required piece. And that is sort of what we are doing so far. The last step will be to just sort of properly send this off so that councils can pull it down and automatically create cases in the system. But that's everything I've got. Back to slides.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jess. And George is going to give us a roundup of the various stuff we've been working on in terms of the content inside the editor.
Thanks, Alistair. I've got some highlights. They all happen to be from the Find Out If You Need Planning Permission service. Sorry about my dog barking in the background. So the first highlight is about improving the next steps, which a user comes to at the end of the service. We really wanted to make it clear what these steps mean. So we've used plain English so that the user knows exactly when they click on it what it means and where the links are going to take them. It's often to a council's planning service website. Next slide, please. This was an interesting one. We got some specialist feedback from a partner on interpreting the legislation about the protection of trees. We added some questions to sort of weed out the nuances in this mid-range, and so we've directly edited the service and added value to it by listening to specialists. Next slide, please. This was a good one. The partners suggested that we change the order of the results because as a user goes through to the end of the service, as soon as they see that they don't need planning permission, they might fail to click continue, which is the green button at the bottom. So we've changed the order of the other notices. So listed building consent and the need for a tree notice comes before the planning permission notice. Next slide, please. Non-residential extensions. We received feedback from a partner that wants we've changed the wording of the question. Are any of the properties sharing a boundary in residential use? We received some feedback in testing that might not be very clear and there's too much going on in that question. So we just made it really plain English, changing it to where other people live. Next slide, please. I think it was Alistair was trying to solve this problem in the flow, and you found out that there was an automation error. So I've just quickly drawn up a dendrogram showing the data fields that are emerging, just to show the range that we've got and you know how the system's getting cleverer. But in this case, we just had a word missed off on that. So it was sending users down the wrong part of the flow. Next slide, please. We made some improvements to the hard surfaces flow, which goes through a lot of different projects. So we've made them consistent across different projects, and we've changed the use of the words permeable and porous and changed it to can rainwater soak through. So it's really clear for users. That's the end of the content roundup.
Thank you very much, George. I can take over sharing, Alistair, if that's...
Yeah, great, fantastic.
Okay. I don't know if you can see. Can you see the presentation?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, hello everyone. My name is Tom, and I'm a designer working on the BOPS project, the back office planning system. And in the last show and tell, my colleague Ben presented or did a demo of some work we've been doing on a feature called Validation Wizard, which had aimed to bring together all of the different resources that a validating officer would need when they're going through that part of the process. And we've since then been testing this, so we had this hypothesis that bringing all the information together into one place, providing them with a list that they could work through, would help sort of simplify the process, speed up their working, and also sort of reduce the amount that they have to remember and make sure that they, you know, reduce the sort of number of errors in that process. So we wanted to sort of test how this was working and were there any sort of unintended consequences. We held 7 sessions working with people whose sort of job it is to validate cases, and this was across Buckinghamshire, Lambeth and Southwark. And I think all but one of these had never used the software before, so they had they were coming in with a sort of complete blank canvas, obviously lots of experience of the job, but no prior knowledge of the system. And we collected these findings together, and then working with the partners have prioritised the outcomes from this testing, what things we need to sort of maybe respond to immediately, and what other improvements we can work on a bit further down the line. And the way we approached this testing was to create a series of lifelike scenarios that explained that explored different parts of this process. So when you're validating an application, as I'm sure many of you know, there are quite a few things you need to check. Have all the right documents and plans been supplied? Are all the ones that have been supplied, are they drawn and prepared correctly? Is the fee paid? You know, and various other sort of different checks. And rather than going through these whole flows, which could be quite time consuming and quite difficult to make sure that we get enough officers' time, we split it up into smaller chunks, and we wrote a process to follow, what things we wanted to look out for, and then it was the partners helpfully put together sort of some real cases that help expose the particular issues we were looking at, such as an applicant sent you the wrong plan, or an applicant has provided some information about a disability exemption on a fee, and exploring whether does the process we provided help the officer who's doing the validation to, you know, come to the correct decision, whether that's to make it invalid and tell the applicant how they need to respond, or whether they can make it valid. And so through these shorter sessions, we got more testers, more variety of testers, and it's been really, really helpful to us to understand what's happening. With the findings, we collected these together from the different testers, and we started to map them out across the different parts of the process to explore, really to see on top of the process where there were repeated comments or questions that were coming up, and to identify some of the quick design opportunities we could follow to make sure that we're responding to any issues and also helping to build for the future, help to improve and sort of build on the success we've had so far. So working through the findings with the partners, we started to prioritise the outcomes. And the first step was to identify any critical issues. Are there any things that are currently in the system that are preventing people from doing something that they need to be able to do? Or are there any sort of major things where there's such a level of misinterpretation that someone might be likely to make a mistake because either the language used is slightly incorrect, or the way that the pages link together is confusing? So we've pulled out a few critical issues that we're already responding to, and then for the rest we mapped them out on a matrix to test further improvement. So we're part of the way through this, but looking at where are the big benefits and what are the quick wins, and maybe what are the things that we might need to invest a bit more time in to think about, particularly where there might be dependencies on bots on different parts of the service or different parts of the planning system as well, so that we can work through in a logical way and help really build and improve this into the future. I'm now going to hand over to Stephen, who's going to talk to you about two-factor authentication.
Thanks, Tom, and good morning, everyone. I'm Stephen Barnes. I'm a senior planner at Lambeth Council, and I'm working across both of the Ripper and BOPS projects. So, two-factor authentication. Basically, the back office planning system will contain applicants' personal data. It might contain sensitive documents, and crucially, it's going to have the ability to issue legally binding decisions on behalf of partner councils. So how are we keeping this safe and secure? Existing back office systems tend to sit behind layers of security at the individual council. So they might be on local servers in the council building. You might need to, as an officer, to get to the back office system, you might have to go through a VPN or even be at the council premises to get into the system and issue decisions. But BOPS is going to be accessed through the open web, and it's not located in any one council server. So the partners have agreed that it's important to have proper authentication to be able to get into that. So after discounting some different options, the solution that we're now ready to adopt is known as two-factor authentication. So the first factor being your email and password when you go to log in, and then once you have gone through that, you'll be prompted to now enter a one-time passcode. So that's a unique code that's sent out for each session, going to your mobile phone, for you as your personal phone or your work phone. So this is a simple process that we're all increasingly familiar with. We use it on a range of apps, and now when you're making card transactions online, it's quite common for your bank to send you a one-time access code. This is an added step to help make sure that you are who you say you are, and it is giving confidence to partner councils in the security of the BOP system. So a working prototype with a robust design has now been worked up, and the next steps for the project team will be rolling out this new function and exploring whether email could also be used to receive the one-time passcodes. So that's pretty much everything on two-factor authentication. So thanks, and I'm handing back to Emily.
Thank you, Stephen, and thanks to all our speakers today for sharing great work from across the projects. So now we're at the end of the show and tell, which means we've reached the Q&A portion. So if anyone watching has had any questions about anything you've seen today or about the project in general, please do post them in the chat. Also open to anyone in the room. If anyone has any questions about things, do share them. I'll now sort of go over to our person behind the scenes, Freya. Have we had any questions come in during the presentation?
No, we haven't yet. I'll post a little message in the Q&A just in case anyone's not seen it. That might make it pop up on their screens, but we haven't had any questions yet.
Okay, that's fine. Has anyone in the room got any questions or things like that? I thought that the save and return demo was really interesting to sort of see that see the way that users interact, that sort of flexibility, and also being able to manage, lots of applications. Really good, and also with the sending to uniform as well. So well done to everyone who's done some great work. It's really great to sort of look at opportunities about like that flexibility around how we kind of send information around. I see, Tom, you've got a question.
Yeah, thank you. It was a question slightly off the back of what Jess was presenting about sending to uniform, but the sort of merging or like not sending of duplicate files, I think was something actually could be quite useful for BOPs, as long as we can sort of maintain all the tags that were added to documents, because we sort of know that some people will come in with one file with all their plans in, and they'll submit it 5 times, and we end up with 5 copies of it. So I think, I mean, if we can reuse that work before we send it to BOPs, that would be amazing, or do something similar on the BOP side, but as long as we can sort of preserve the tags that might have been associated with all the different varieties of, or different times that file's been submitted, that I think would be quite a neat way to solve that problem in hopefully not too much work. But yeah, I don't know quite where it might sit further down the line from on the Ripper side.
Yeah, that's a great, this is Jessica, great thing to point out. The duplicate files thing actually had just sort of come on my radar like yesterday afternoon, and I also immediately, once it like sort of caused a bug on the uniform side, it was a little moment of like, oh, this is a useful thing we've just learned from this integration, that I'm realizing we don't deduplicate the files when we send them to BOPs. And that is, but yeah, definitely something we can look into, with like the extra piece of like, we need to be able to preserve all of the unique tags. Yeah, but a ticket for the roadmap.
Great, thanks.
We've had a question just come through from someone watching the meeting. So they said, why will the save option not work for the easier flows? So it's a Ripper question.
I can do this one if you like, Duff. So basically it's more, so it's we're only using save and return for applications that involve an apply for sort of function. So the find out if you need planning permission service, it's just you exploring information on your own time as a user, and you're not submitting anything, which is actually probably a relief. I imagine for some users would be quite happy to be able to kind of just privately explore some of those things without without going, oh, I'm sending this to a planning officer. So services like that, which are just purely for information, where the user's just coming for information and leaving with information, we don't think, there's no indication anyway that there's a need to kind of save and return to an application later. I mean, sure, if there is a user need, we'll do it, but that gets shared with us, we could do it, but we don't think there's a need to. Whereas obviously, and it's really, we know very strongly that when you're preparing an application and uploading files and things like that, it's not only possible that users will do that application over more than one session. Actually, we think it's going to be pretty much always the case, or certainly the case in most of the time. So that's why, but we've got total control. So at the moment, as Daph said, we're using the presence of a send component as the kind of toggle. So if a service has a send, if it's sending something to a council, we're saying, this is probably the type of service where people want to save and return. But we could separate that and just have it as a toggle on, toggle off option. And then if users say, oh, actually, no, we'd really like to be able to save and return to say, find out if you need planning permission, we could do that too.
Great, thank you. And then we just have, it's a comment rather than a question. Someone spotted a spelling error on the 2-factor authentication page. So thank you to that person. We'll make that update. And then that's all the questions. There's nothing more showing now.
Okay, so thank you to those who've sort of shared questions and comments. And I guess the last thing to do is really to say thank you to everyone who's tuned in today, for everyone who's spoken. I hope you've all found this session useful. Some really great updates from across both projects. So if you go to the next slide, please. So as always, if you would like to get in touch with the project team or find out a bit more about the projects, we're always on the lookout for people to do user testing across both sides of the project. So please do get in touch if that's something you'd be interested in. You can find some contact details on this slide, as well as sort of the project websites where you can find out more information. So our next show and tell will be in around 4 weeks' time, which I estimate being roughly around the 25th of May. Until then, I hope everyone sort of stays well, and we hope to see you at the next show and tell. Thank you very much.